If you need to capture footage of yourself playing tennis, you know that it isn't always easy. Tripods can get in the way, maybe your setup isn't sturdy enough, and maybe there isn't an alternative place for you to just set it and forget your camera as you play your game. Today, we're gonna fix that with this camera setup. Stay tuned to the end because I have important tips that'll maximize your recording experience. For this setup, you can use any camera, phone, GoPro, DSLR, or whatever it may be. For this example, I'm going to use my phone. You're going to want a sturdy phone mount. If you're going to attach an external microphone like this, you'll want a phone mount with a hot shoe on top. If you're like me and you're going to use an external microphone, you're going to want to use a sturdy phone clamp. This one's by Ulanzi. I like it. It's tough, it's metal, doesn't feel cheap. For the external microphone that I'm going to be using, it's by Rode. This one's about like $40, $60. Great external microphone to start out. It has this wind muff that you have on top, but you can also remove it. You're also going to want an articulating arm to be able to lock off just the right position for your camera. And last but not least, you're going to want to use a super clamp to mount all of this to the fence. If you're using a DSLR or mirrorless camera, I recommend attaching a camera strap, using it as a safety catch, just in case for some odd reason there happens to be some stray balls. I attach one end to my camera and thread the other end to the fence, and then I attach the other end to the camera again. This way, if anything happens to my setup or something wasn't tightened correctly, my expensive camera setup will never touch the ground unless the whole fence comes down. The camera strap that I'm using here is the Peak Design system. It's got anchors that you could attach. It's easy to lock on and detach. As an alternative, you could use a Gorillapod like setup to mount your camera to the fence. I'm not endorsing this, but I have climbed to the top of fences to just get the highest angle that I can with the Gorilla tripod. However, in the end, I decided not to use the Gorillapod anymore because every time that the ball would hit the fence, the position of the camera would change. By the way, all these items can be found in the description down below. Alright, so how do you put it all together? The first half will be the phone mount, and the optional external microphone. Okay, we got the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the phone mount. You just slide it on through and tighten it down. And since I'm using an iPhone, I have a lightning cord to 3.5mm adapter. Gonna plug that in. We're gonna slide in the Rode Video Micro, tighten the top, like this end, plug it in here. Alright, this is the first half. Alright, as for the second half, you just have the super clamp and the articulating arm. So for this arm, this is really where you tighten down and close the clamp, mount it against the fence. But here, as you see, there are 3 mounting points, 1/4 inch threads that you can just screw this in. Okay, we're operational. Now we just take this too. There's a 1/4 inch thread here on the bottom of this phone mount, and you just screw that on, thread that through. Alright, now we just pretty much have this vlog and tripod setup, except we're gonna clamp this side onto the fence. So let's say it's like right here. So once that is clamped onto the fence, we can then manipulate this arm here in whatever position. Okay, so we can attach this side to the fence. And once that's done, we can articulate this arm here with the lock, maneuver the phone however we'd like. Pretty easy. Now when I mount this to the fence, I make sure that I mount it shooting towards an open field or forest in the background. Behind the camera, behind this mount, is more tennis courts. But to avoid distracting backgrounds, I make sure that there's no other tennis courts in the background of the shot that I have. As you can see by this example, no other tennis courts in the background or other players around us, perfectly fine. After I mount the setup, then I slide in the camera. Before sliding in your phone, you may want to make sure that your video recording app is already set up and open on your phone so you can just hit record. You'll also want to make sure that you have Do Not Disturb mode on so that any calls would not interrupt your recording session. If you have an iPhone and an Apple Watch, you should be able to go into the camera app on your watch to be able to monitor yourself and check your framing. That way you can make sure that your frame is horizontally straight and you can see a good amount of the court and the players. Then when it's all squared away, you can hit record and begin play. Here's a comparison of what it looks like recording from a tripod with my Sony a6400 with the Sigma 16mm f1.4 versus the camera setup with the fence of my iPhone 11 Pro Max at 0.5 zoom, which you want to note is at a wider and higher angle than my Sony a6400. As you can see, I have the microphone wind muff in the shot of my iPhone, but you can also remove the wind muff to get it out of your shot. Or you could just record using 1x zoom, which is the default shot when you first open your camera app. So don't worry if you don't have that wide angle lens on your phone. As a recreational tennis player, I've recorded myself with different methods, but this is so far the best way to record myself. I can document my gameplay, critique and analyze my game, and improve my overall skill and experience as I repeat this process. Plus, I can save my highlight reels for myself. You know, just for fun. So you pretty much have a good idea of how to put it all together and how to use it. But before you go, I just want to leave you with some important tips. If your setup happens to fall, you'll want to tighten it more in the future. Just when I thought I was tightening the clamp and the articulating arm too much, I actually wasn't. I was using a Sony a7C with the Tamron 17-28 f2.8, and boy did that hurt. That costed me $250 to have it fixed. Trust me, if you use a camera strap or some kind of rode to catch your camera, you'll save yourself some heartache. Another tip is that you'll want to make sure that you check your camera in between sets of play, instead of having one long recording for 2 to 3 sets. Sometimes your battery is exhausted too early, or for some freak reason your camera stopped recording. If you're not going to use an external microphone attached to your phone camera, you can use an external battery bank to keep it going. Most phones, and even cameras, will allow you to record and charge at the same time. If you won't put your phone in Do Not Disturb mode, or maybe you just ran out of storage space, your recording may just stop. So do check up on your phone if you do want your footage actually recorded. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that if slow motion is important to you, especially for highlight reels or replays, you'll want to, at minimum, record at 1080p at 60 frames per second. This is a more friendly file size than 4K 60 frames per second, or even 1080p at 120 frames per second, or 240 frames per second. You can slow it down in your video editing program later. You don't need all those frames unless you know the exact shot that you're gonna take, like one-off shot. But if you're recording a long-term game, 60 frames is just fine. You can slow things down later in your video editing program. I use Final Cut Pro, and I usually slow down my 60 frames per second footage to 40% on a 24 frame per second timeline. Whew, that's a mouthful. Now that you got your footage captured, I got a video over here on how to edit your videos much faster. If it hasn't yet released, you can check out my other tutorials here. Thanks again for watching. Now go out there and shoot for the life that matters. See ya!